primary reason for post-high school education is to become cultured ladies and gentlemen, to learn how to fit into society, how to enjoy life. In a word, we need to learn to live as well as to learn how to make a living. This is the educational ideal that should light our lives. I now hand that torch to you. May you hold it high.
As the founding dean of the BYU College of Fine Arts, Gerrit de Jong Jr. lived the ideals he taught. For him, learning to live meant developing an amazing range of talents as an accomplished musician and composer, artist, linguist, vocalist, author, and theologian. Along with being a remarkable educator, Gerrit de Jong Jr. was a true Renaissance man. Gerrit de Jong Jr. was born in Holland in 1892. Even as a boy working in his father's dry goods store, it was obvious Gerrit was blessed with an astounding range of abilities. Fascinated by languages, he became conversant in English, German, and French, along with his native Dutch, by the time he finished elementary school. His boyhood drawings were exhibited in Vienna, and his talent earned him special permission from the Dutch National Museum in Amsterdam to do a series of sketches from Rembrandt's The Night Watch, which was housed there. He had also shown a rare gift for music. So, despite his family's modest income, Gerrit's father decided to invest in his son's talent. For his 12th birthday, Gerrit was offered a choice, a bicycle or a piano. Though Gerrit chose the bike, the piano had already been purchased. It came with a contract for private lessons. With these, as in all of his studies, Gerrit excelled.
My parents and my grandparents had singled me out as the one in the family to receive all possible benefits of education. Consequently, it became almost an obsession with me to distinguish myself in my studies.
But plans for him were cut short in 1906 when a fire gutted his father's store. The destruction was complete, and starting again from scratch was the family's only option. So the de Jongs boarded a steamer and sailed for America. Their one American contact was in Salt Lake City, Gerrit's Aunt Marie, who had been disowned by her family for joining the church. When the de Jongs arrived, they moved next door. Within a few months, everyone in the family was baptized, except for Gerrit, who felt the need to investigate further. But when his friends in the church began talking about possible errors in the translation of the Bible, Gerrit's interest in languages got the better of him.
I was at once fascinated. It was on this familiar ground, during these linguistically slanted discussions, that the reasonableness of many Latter-day Saint doctrines became more and more evident to me.
Gerrit joined the church. Eventually, he married Rosabelle Weiniger and opened a piano studio on South Temple. To supplement his income, he played piano in a three-piece dance band. The clarinetist in the group was Clarence J. Hawkins, who led the orchestra at LDS University. Within 4 years, Gerrit would join him on the faculty there. But anxious to further his own education, Gerrit often spent his summers at other schools. From the University of Utah, he earned a bachelor's degree in Spanish and a master's in French language instruction. In 1921, he attended the National University of Mexico at Mexico City. And by 1925, he found himself teaching a summer session at BYU. President Franklin Harris was already aware of Gerrit's outstanding reputation. Once they became acquainted, he was convinced Gerrit was the man to head up a project he'd long been contemplating. He wanted to develop a college of fine arts.
I don't want people to think that when a boy comes to school for his bachelor's degree and he wants to major in painting or music or dramatic arts, that there's something wrong with his head.
He offered Gerrit the position of dean, but the decision to accept it would not be easy. Colleges of fine arts were unheard of in the western United States. Gerrit would begin with meager resources and no official building. And the very next day, the University of Utah, which was then much larger and more prestigious than the Y, would ask Gerrit to head its Spanish department. Gerrit chose BYU, and a new college was born. Operating on a shoestring budget, he welcomed 100 students the first year. The number would grow to 2,500 by the time Gerrit left the university. And soon, administrators from all over the country were visiting the Y to learn how to start fine arts colleges of their own. As if the task of building his own college weren't enough, Gerrit served simultaneously as a professor of modern languages. He even took an extended leave to get a PhD in Germanic languages and literature from Stanford. An accompanying commendation declared that he'd done the finest work in language in the history of the school. He had such a facility for language he could teach just about anything, from Norwegian to Greek.
For instance, 3 boys came to me and said, "Dr. de Jong, we're going east in the fall to do graduate work, and none of us has had a word of Latin here." Well, that wouldn't do. So that summer we sat around a table, and I pounded them full of Latin.
By the 1940s, Gerrit's facility as a linguist had received national attention. When the Deseret News asked him how many languages he could speak, he quipped, "I don't know exactly, but I speak one more when I'm angry." Gerrit's growing reputation eventually led to a request from the federal government. World War II had left lingering fears in Washington that Nazis had established enclaves in South America, so Gerrit would soon be taking his family on another leave from BYU, this time to head an American cultural center in Brazil. It was just one of several such centers fostering U.S. relations in the region, and it established Gerrit as an international authority on Brazilian language and culture. At BYU, he would become known as Mr. Portuguese. Meanwhile, back in his own college, Gerrit was also busy composing. He wrote music constantly. When invited to give a talk at a banquet, he'd have a new composition blocked out on the napkin before he stood up to speak. And his list of symphonies and oratorios was long enough to be impressive for a full-time composer. Though Gerrit could play everything from the French horn to the piano, he considered the string quartet to be the highest musical form. His Quartet in C minor was performed by the world-famous Paganini Quartet in 1950, and he composed his hymn, "Come Sing to the Lord," by special request while serving on the church music committee. But Gerrit's most far-reaching contribution in church service was his work on the Sunday School General Board. There, he served for 34 years, writing 8 gospel doctrine manuals and meeting with Latter-day Saints across Europe. Most he addressed in their own tongue, and with such ease his audiences each considered him a native speaker. Later in life, he would be called as a temple worker and perform sealings in 6 different languages. In time, President David O. McKay would set aside a special room for him in the Salt Lake Temple, and Gerrit would use it to translate the endowment into Portuguese for Brazilian converts. After more than 30 years, Gerrit's tenure as dean would begin drawing to a close, but his fondest dream remained unfulfilled. His faculty still had no official building. Then, President Ernest Wilkinson made an historic announcement just 2 years before Gerrit's retirement from the college. An architect had been hired. Appropriately, the firm was Portuguese. Gerrit worked with them personally, designing every detail. Completed in 1965 after years of construction, the Harris Fine Arts Center bore the name of the BYU president who had brought Gerrit to Provo, and Gerrit's name graced the building's largest concert hall. By the end of his life, Gerrit de Jong Jr. would have earned degrees in 3 languages and studied at universities in 5 foreign countries. His accolades would include the Carl G. Mazur Award, the David O. McKay Award, and BYU Special Service Award. In the process, he would leave BYU a legacy of academic excellence and artistic achievement characteristic of a true Renaissance man. And his emphasis on foreign cultures and worldwide service would set precedents for outreach that have become a tradition in fine arts and performance at Brigham Young University.